Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Michelle and I make videos about books. Today I'm really excited because I have two memoirs that I've just been dying to talk to somebody about. And one of the reasons I made this channel on BookTube here is so that I could talk about books I loved. And here we go. These two are two memoirs, very different survival stories, which are my favorite. One came out, I believe, in 2018 and the other in 1998. You should be able to find both out there still. So the first one I want to talk about is called Seductive Poison, a Jonestown survivor's story of life and death in the People's Temple. This revolves around the story of Deborah Layton here, who was a member of Jim Jones's People's Temple cult, who tragically, in November of 1978, 913 people were poisoned with cyanide. Some took their own lives. Some were forced to drink the Flavor Aid or Kool-Aid, as it's been, the phrase drink the Kool-Aid came from this event. Anyway, some were shot. It was an enormous tragedy. I was 10 years old at the time that this happened, so I do remember hearing about it on the news. And I was so curious to find out, A, how does someone get involved in a doomsday cult like this in the first place? How did she escape? How on earth could she escape from something like that and survive to tell the story? As it turns out, very few people have written memoirs of their experiences there, because only a handful, well, not many escaped for one thing. Only a few of them wrote books because it was just so traumatic. I mean, to this day, the survivors are probably still working through what happened to them. Anyhow, this is Deborah's story. It reads like a thriller. It's unbelievable the lengths she went to not only survive within the cult, but to plan her escape, execute her escape, and then go on to try to help the people who she left behind. At the time of her escape, she had gone there with her mother, who was terminally ill with cancer, as well as her older brother, who became one of Jim Jones's right-hand men. So she left that all behind, all her friends and family, to come home. She rang alarm bells. She swore to an affidavit detailing everything that was going on. Her actions spurned an investigation. A congressman named Leo Ryan from California flew down with a bunch of journalists, cameramen, other people who went down to investigate exactly what was going on down there in Guyana, South America. And yeah, the events that followed were nothing short of horrific. They went to leave. They were all gunned down at the airstrip. And then that same day, later on that day, is when the mass tragedy occurred. But this story is interesting because we get to know how Deborah and her mother got involved in the church to begin with, how Jim Jones rose to power. He had an enormous influence in San Francisco. He was able to convince people to vote for certain candidates in local elections. He was great at raising money. His church raised a ton of money in a very short amount of time. He got a huge number of followers, and he was so charismatic and persuasive and likable that people easily fell under his influence. And I mean, the people in this church, the People's Temple, basically all they wanted was a sense of meaning. They wanted to be seen and heard. Some of them were kind of lost in their lives, others were not. But yeah, they all wanted to live, a simple life with meaning and purpose. And they were a socialist group. They identified as socialist. And eventually, the reason why Jim Jones moved them all to the jungles of South America was because of his paper trail. He was starting to arouse suspicion from the government, his money trail and everything. So he's like, okay, screw this, we're out of here. His drug usage was increasing. His behavior was becoming more and more erratic. So he said, he talked everybody into, whoever wants to come, we're going to go forge our own society in the jungle in Guyana. We are going to live beyond the reach of the government. We're going to live off grid. grow our own organic produce. There'll be no racism, no paying taxes. We'll be completely in control of our own lives. We'll help each other raise our children and just form our new peaceful society in paradise. That's how it was put to these people. Once they arrived, Deborah among them, and her mother and her brother, they arrived there to find that it was nothing more than a clearing in the bush. They had put up a sign, but it was like a forced labor camp is what it was. Far beyond what they were promised, the total opposite of what they were expecting. They were given only as much food as was required to keep them alive. They were given rice, some water, the odd banana. They had drills in the middle of the night that Jim Jones had started to practice leading up to the doomsday event that would be the mass slaughter and suicide. They would wake up in 2 a.m. to Jim Jones yelling on a speaker, get up, and they called these events White Nights where they'd practice. So eventually, a lot of them became completely disenchanted. They had moments of clarity where they started to realize, like, this isn't right. This is a labor camp and we're being tortured, and Jim Jones is, abusing people and raping people and using drugs. He was getting people to steal Deborah's mother's cancer medication for his own use, and so on and so forth. So she finally decides, okay, I have to get out of here. I have to leave my mother behind. I have to leave my brother and my friends and my found family behind. I have to get the word out that this is happening. She escaped in May or June, and she did a signed affidavit of the events so that she could raise awareness, tell everybody what was going on. It fell on skeptical ears. It was just too horrific. People didn't want to take it there, or they couldn't take it seriously. They couldn't imagine that something like this was going on. So finally, a congressman in California named Leo Ryan decides to go with a camera crew, a bunch of journalists. They get on a plane, they fly down there to see what's going on. And at first, it's very tense. There's armed gunmen that meet them at the airport and take them out to the Jonestown encampment. They meet with Jim Jones. He assures them that everybody there is there of their own free will. They're not being held against their will at all. They're being well fed, well taken care of. They're all happy. They put on a concert for the congressmen and the journalists and the camera crew. And it's well documented. You can find it on YouTube. You can see them singing and eating dinner and drinking and dancing and having a good time. And so as far as the Leo Ryan and his crew could tell, maybe they were being looked after and maybe there wasn't a problem. The next day, before they went to leave, some cult members were approaching them and sliding them notes and saying, help me escape. Don't believe what he's telling you. Jim Jones is evil. So anyway, he decides to take some people and try and bring them back to the States with him. Somebody attacks him and stabs him as he's leaving. He survives. They get to the airport. They're getting on the plane about to leave, and some armed gunmen come out of the bush and start shooting. Congressman Ryan is killed in cold blood. A couple other people wounded, another couple killed. It's unbelievable what happened to these people. Deborah Layton, this is her story, but it's also the story of everybody who is there. How this happened, how she escaped. It's a taut thrill ride of a book. You won't be able to put it down. There are a lot of lessons to be learned in this as far as human nature. What people wanted back then is not so different than what people want now in 2025. You could completely understand how they could fall prey to something like this. And yeah, I think if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, Seductive Poison, Life and Death in the People's Temple by Deborah Layton. I hope you do find this book. It's worth your time. It's just unbelievable. And yeah, the second book, moving on, nice segue. Moving on, the second book I have to talk about is called Alone, Lost Overboard. in the Indian Ocean by Brett Archibald. Now, Brett Archibald is a South African businessman. I think he worked in finance or something like that. He's about to turn 50, so he organizes a surfing expedition for himself and about 5 or 6 of his closest friends. They're going to go to Indonesia, to some remote islands there called Mentawai Islands. I'm sorry if I got that pronunciation wrong, but I happened across this book in the nonfiction section of my bookstore, and I thought it sounded really interesting, and it did not disappoint. So we start off the story with Brett and his buddies going surfing. They are on this charter boat that they've hired. Day one, they order pizza from a sketchy pizza joint, and they're having beers and drinks on the first night, and they're all excited and happy, as you do. So they're kind of partying, and they all get desperately sick, food poisoning, on day one from this pizza. They've set sail, they're off in the sea, and there's an enormous storm that rolls in. Thunder and lightning, enormous swells. They're desperately sick with food poisoning. 2 a.m. rolls around, and Brett can't sleep. He's going to be sick, so he goes out on the deck to vomit over the edge. He gets so violently ill that he actually blacks out, falls overboard, comes to in the water in the middle of the night to see his friends in the boat sailing off, not knowing that he's fallen overboard. So basically, he's like, yeah, I'm screwed. So it's his survival story. It's shark-infested waters. It's seabirds trying to gouge his eyes out. It's him, how he survived in the water for 18 hours is so interesting to me. We also get the perspective of the sea captain, this guy named Tony. His nickname is Doris. They call him Doris throughout the book, but he's a Queenslander who has a reputation as an eccentric, and he's a real-life guy who went out on the rescue mission. His perspective is really entertaining to read from. We also get Brett's buddies on board the boat when they wake up in a panic and find that he's not there. The captain of that charter boat is freaking out. I think he's Indonesian. He's panicked because he's responsible for all souls on board. He doesn't want to lose his job, his income. He's got a family to feed and support. He doesn't want to get sued. Like, the enormity of this is just starting to set in. The other perspective we get is of Brett's wife and family back home, who are going spare with worry about him. Communication is sketchy at best. So they are, we get their perspective. We get his thoughts, his survival story. Like I said, it reads like a high seas adventure. If you, like me, find the ocean to be quite a terrifying place, like, this whole subject of this book is like nightmare fuel for me. So I had to find out for myself, how on earth do you survive something like this? So yeah, Alone, Lost Overboard in the Indian Ocean by Brett Archibald. Highly recommend. It's about it's about 350 or so pages. But, and you know what, even though in both of these cases, the people survived, it's just unbelievably extraordinary circumstances, lives I'll never lead. So I just find that so interesting. I had to tell you about these 2 books. I hope you'll be able to find them or pick up one or both. If you're as interested as I am in cults, survival stories, high seas adventure, and the jungle, geography, politics, all that kind of stuff, I think you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for listening to me talk about these two of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. And thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.